Hey everyone, welcome to the video. Let's go over the 7-game NBA slate for today on Draftkings. But before we continue, as always, if you guys could just leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, please hit the subscribe button. Really helps me out. Really appreciate it. Also follow me over on Twitter. I'm at Pennell16. And if you're in support over on Patreon, it's always much appreciated. We finally got over 100 Patrons last week, so that was pretty awesome. So hopefully we can keep on building that. This is a new Patreon goal, but double thank you to anyone that does support me over there. I do put a lot of effort into putting out this extra content that I do every single night or every single week, just depending on the sport. We got NBA going on every single night right now. Then we have NASCAR every single week, which is NASCAR is kind of like my big thing. I put a lot of time into NASCAR articles, my projections, everything I do over there. And then we have MLB coming up in like less than, I want to say it's like 15-ish days, which is awesome because I love baseball. So I'm going to be doing baseball every single day. So if you want access to all my sports, I do have an all sports package where you can save some money and you get access to my Discord chats as well. But if you're interested, like I said, links in the description below. Check it out if you're interested. And without further ado, let's get into today's slate. So up top, we got Luka Dončić. He comes in at 11,000, and this is a back-to-back for the Mavericks. So I'm going to assume that Kristaps Porzingis is going to be listed as out. If you go into the DraftKings, there's no injury designation at the moment. But every time there's a back-to-back, Porzingis ends up sitting pretty much every single time. So I had to assume that's going to be the case again. And if Luka's going to be all by himself, you'd have to have some interest because Porzingis, he's a heavy usage rate player. He's a pretty high point per minute guy, and if you take him off the court, obviously Luka's going to get a pretty big bump. Now this matchup versus Denver is nothing to be too excited about. It's going to be a pretty slow-paced game, as Dallas is ranked 24th in pace, while Denver is 28th. But Luka's numbers are so good in the season, 1.67 points per minute, 37% usage rate. And if you take Porzingis off the court, those numbers go up even more, all the way up to 1.72 points per minute with a 39% usage rate. So obviously he gets a bump when you take Porzingis off the court. Like I said, the matchup's not great versus Denver. They rank, let's see. Let me fix this. Okay, Denver ranks 7th versus point guards and 1st versus shooting guards. So it's a very tough matchup for Luka, but don't really care about matchups when it comes to Luka. The guy's pretty much matchup proof. He's got triple-double upside every single night. He's almost averaging a 30-point triple-double in the season. 28.5 points, 8.7 assists, 9.4 rebounds. So Luka Dončić, Kristaps Porzingis is out. Makes the case for the top play of the slate. We also have plenty of value to do so. Well, I shouldn't say plenty, but there's a pretty obvious value play that we can plug in tonight. So, yeah, Luka should be pretty easy to fit in if you want. Trae Young, he comes in at 10,400. He gets a really nice matchup versus the Knicks, who have struggled versus point guards this season. They're ranked 22nd versus the position, and it's actually one of their more soft spots. They've actually been okay defensively overall, but they have struggled versus point guards. And we just saw Bradley Beal have a monster, not that Bradley Beal plays point guard, but he just had a monster game versus the Knicks last night. And I think Trae Young can certainly do the same, and he comes in about 600 cheaper than Luka. And now Luka's much safer because he does everything in the stat sheet. Trae Young, I mean, he gets the assist, he'll get some rebounds too, and he can score a lot of points, but he doesn't really have that nightly triple-double upside that Luka happens to have. And nor is he as good point per minute wise. He's at 1.43 points per minute, 34.9% usage rate. Not bad numbers by any means, but I mean, for 600 more, I think we should probably find a way to fit in Luka. But Trae Young, I think he's definitely a fine option. Bam Adebayo, he comes in at 9K. So, interesting situation for Miami. It's that Jimmy Butler is questionable for this game. Now, if I remember that I read correctly, I believe he practiced yesterday. I should probably double check that before I go on and on about it, but let me check. And good thing I checked. He did not practice, but he was feeling better, so there's optimism that he could play. I have no idea if he's going to end up playing or not, but if he's out, Bam Adebayo makes a case as one of the best plays in the slate because his numbers go up quite a bit when you take Jimmy Butler off the court. Now, he is pretty expensive at 9K. If he was in that 8K range, like lower 8K range, I'd feel like he'd be almost a lock, even if Butler was playing. Not quite a lock, but almost a lock, but he's pretty expensive at 9K, but I mean, the guy's got 50-point upside, and if you take Butler off the court, those numbers go up even more. I mean, he's good in the season, 1.18 points per minute, 20.7% usage rate. You take Butler off the court, those numbers get closer to 1.3 points per minute and well over 20% usage rate. So, Bam Adebayo, I think he's fine in all formats. Now, Butler does play. I mean, it's probably more of a GPP play because obviously that's going to hurt him a little bit, but the guy's got plenty of upside even if Butler does play. And this matchup versus Charlotte's absolutely elite. They rank, 28th versus centers, 25th versus power forwards. So it's a great spot for Bam Adebayo. And, he's going to play mid-30s minutes, and he does a little bit of everything in the stat sheet as well. He's not just completely scoring dependent. He's averaging 10.6 rebounds per game, 5 assists, which is pretty good for a center, and 16.1 points per game. So Bam, I think he's a pretty solid play in all formats. Drew Holiday, he's coming off a 60-point fantasy outing. That's this kind of upside he has every single night. These New Orleans games just tend to be high scoring every single time. They're a great offensive team, but they suck defensively, and they also play blazing fast. So that's what leads to these high scoring games. I believe one site said this is a 235 total. If I had to guess, this is probably going to be the highest total in the slate because all these other games aren't great. I mean, Atlanta, New York's okay, but Sacramento, New Orleans, I feel like it's going to have the highest total, so we're definitely going to want pieces from this game. And the thing about the Pelicans is, if you want to stack those guys, it's not hard to do so because the most expensive guy is Drew Holiday at 8,200. So if you want to stack the whole Pelicans, you can certainly do so, and you don't have to worry about salary too much because if you want to run it back with any of these Kings, they're all pretty cheap as well. I think the most expensive King is De'Aaron Fox at 7,800. So yeah, if you certainly want to game set that game up, you certainly can. It's also the late game, so I feel like that's what people are going to do in the first place anyway. But yeah, Drew Holiday should have some interest here. Sacramento does struggle versus guards and small forwards. They're pretty good versus big men, but when it comes to the guard position and forwards, or small forwards I should say, they struggle. If you look at the DVP chart, Sacramento, they rank 18th versus point guards, 21st versus shooting guards. So this is a pretty good spot for Drew Holiday, and the guy's been good all season. He's averaging 1.17 points per minute, 24.7% usage rate. The guy's going to play as many minutes as he can handle, and it's going to be a high total in this game. The Pelicans play blazing fast. Kings don't play very fast, but the Pelicans should look to push the pace here, and the Kings should be looking in a pace-up spot. So definitely like Drew Holiday. I think he's a solid option. Christian Wood, he comes in at 8,100. I don't love the spot versus Philly, but the guy just does not know how to have a bad game. Ever since all these guys have been out for Detroit, he's pretty much just a lock to put up 35-plus points with upside of near 50. Now, if Joel Embiid is back for this game, he is listed as questionable. Obviously, it's going to hurt Christian Wood a little bit because Joel Embiid's a pretty solid defender, and it's obviously going to help their interior defense, Philly, that is, but I mean, if he's out, Christian Wood should be able to have another good game, around 40 fantasy points, if not a little bit more, if he hits his ceiling. But Christian Wood's just been so good point per minute wise. If you take all these guys off the court, just as regular numbers on the season, 1.17 points per minute, 22% usage rate. You take Reggie Jackson off the court, Derrick Rose off the court, Andre Drummond off the court, Blake Griffin off the court, Luke Kennard off the court, Markieff Morris off the court. The guy's nearly at 1.3 points per minute, nearly. And well over a 20% usage rate. So Christian Wood, despite the bad matchup versus Philly, but if Joel Embiid's out, obviously that gets a little bit softer versus guys like Al Horford and Mike Scott. So, Christian Wood, I think he is fine in all formats. Now, jumping down to Jimmy Butler, we do not know if he's going to play in this game. Obviously, if he doesn't play, don't play him. If he does play, there could be concern from how bad he was last game before he left the injury, and also he might be playing a little bit injured. But let's just assume he's good to go for this game. He's going to get 35 minutes. I think he's a pretty good play at 8K because whenever Jimmy Butler's around upper 7K, lower 8K, I always put him in here just because he's always a safe, solid cash game play, and that's what I would view him as if he's good to go for this game. No setbacks. 8K, yeah, not a bad price tag, and on the season, 1.2 points per minute, 25% usage rate. Matchup versus Charlotte, it's not the greatest. They do play very slow. I believe they're the slowest paced team in the NBA, but I still think Jimmy Butler will be fine. In Charlotte, they also rank 16th versus small forwards and 18th versus shooting guards, so it's a pretty solid matchup for Jimmy Butler. So as long as he's good to go, I think he's a safe cash game play. Brandon Ingram, I'd rather play Brandon Ingram just because it's a better game environment, in my opinion. But I'm also a pretty big Brandon Ingram fan when it comes to DFS. I play Brandon Ingram quite a bit, and I also think 8K is a pretty fair price tag. Whenever Brandon Ingram's anywhere from like 7 to 8K, it just kind of feels like a steal because he's just so good. And he's good for that price tag. If he's 10K, I'm never going to play him. But 8K, that's just a pretty fair price tag for Brandon Ingram. And again, we got a 235 total in this game, I believe that's what it is. So you're definitely going to want exposure to it, and it's the late game. So certainly like Brandon Ingram. Now, obviously, but ever since Zion came back from injury, he's obviously taken a little bit of a hit because he was nearly at 1.3 points per minute, now all the way down to 1.22. But that's still pretty solid numbers, 1.22 points per minute, 28.2% usage rate. In Sacramento, they do struggle versus small forwards. As you can see, they rank 15th versus the position, second versus power forwards, but that's more of like Zion's and Derek Favors kind of matchup. But I still think Brandon Ingram's going to have a pretty solid game here at 8K. Should be able to get you around 40 fantasy points, and you'll take that at 8K. He also has upside for more. Lonzo Ball, another Pelican, he has been going off recently. Now, I know he kind of cooled down a little bit in the last game, but he had a recent stretch of 50-point fantasy outings just consecutively. He was balling out. And I think that could continue here versus Sacramento. They struggle versus guards all season. Like I've said, they rank 18th versus point guards, 21st versus shooting guards, and the guy has found his 3-point shot. And if he can keep shooting like that, he should be able to pay off his price tag at 7,900. And the thing is, he's not completely scoring dependent. He can do a little bit of everything in the stat sheet. If you look at his numbers on the season, he's at 7 assists per game, only 12 points per game, and 6.2 rebounds. But the way he's been scoring recently, that's why he's been scoring 50 fantasy point games, because he does a little bit of everything in the stat sheet. But if you add that scoring upside that he's been showing, he's going to kill that price tag. Now, I don't expect him to keep scoring like that and shooting threes like that, but if it just continues for the recent stretch, I mean, Lonzo Ball is a pretty solid play at 7,900, and I mean, I want exposure to this game. Sacramento struggles versus guards. I think Lonzo's a pretty solid, safe play in this game. Zion Williamson, he's not going to play as many minutes as these guys like Lonzo, Ingram, or Drew Holiday, but he's also the best point per minute player between the four of them. He's at 1.24 points per minute with a 29.6% usage rate. Now, the matchup versus Sacramento is pretty tough down low. They do rank 2nd versus power forwards, 7th versus centers. But you could also look at it on the flip side, that Sacramento's got a tough matchup trying to guard Zion. So that's what I prefer to look at, because Zion's pretty unstoppable down low. And he can do almost whatever he wants. Now, I know he's still a rookie, but the guy's definitely he's gonna be very, very good. I think we all know that. So yeah, I don't mind Zion here. Just really good point per minute wise, and he's below 8K, so definitely on my radar despite the bad matchup. But you're definitely going to want exposure to this game. De'Aaron Fox, 7,800. I feel like he's going to be one of my favorite plays on the slate, because he's going up against New Orleans as a point guard, and I always like recommending De'Aaron Fox, because he always draws me in and he usually disappoints me. But I don't think he's going to disappoint us this time. He's below 8K, and he gets that elite matchup versus New Orleans. It's a big pace-up spot for the Kings, as they're 21st in pace of play, while the Pelicans are 2nd. And his numbers are good in the season. They're almost like Zion's. He's at 1.21 points per minute, 29.6% usage rate. He can be pretty hit or miss, but I think this is one of the games where we get a pretty big hit, because New Orleans, they rank 29th versus point guard, so it's about as good a matchup as you can ask for De'Aaron Fox. You're going to want exposure to this game. I expect him to be very popular, and I think it's for good reasons. So De'Aaron Fox, definitely one of my favorite plays on the entire slate as of right now. Then skip it down, we have Julius Randle. He comes in at 7,800. So I actually ended up landing on Julius Randle, which sucked last night, because there was 3 minutes into the first quarter, the Knicks were getting absolutely murdered by the Wizards, and the coach, he just pulled out all the starters. They took out Randle, they took out, I believe, Gibson, they took out Elfrid Payton, and then whoever else was on there. He took them all out, and then the backups ended up just going off. Bobby Portis went off in that first quarter, so Julius Randle did not play that much in that game. Then he ended up fouling out. He actually picked it up. Then with 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter, he ended up fouling out. So he finished with 25 fantasy points, which absolutely sucked. It was a good matchup. What are you going to do? It's just how it goes sometimes, but I expect them to bounce back in this game versus Atlanta. We know they're how trash they are defensively. It's also a pretty big pace-up spot for the Knicks. They're 18th in pace of play, while Atlanta is 4th, and they're also going up against the worst defense in the NFL, in the NBA, as they rank 28th versus power forwards and 28th versus centers. Randle's been solid for the most part all season. He can be a little bit up or down, but 1.15 points per minute, 27.6% usage rate. I don't mind Julius Randle. I think he's fine in all formats. Elfrid Payton, 6,500, another guy. He had a terrible, terrible, terrible night last night. He was one of the guys that got pulled. Then he got into some foul trouble. They pulled him again. Not have a good game, but if you expect him to get around 30 minutes in this game at 6,500, he should be able to pay off his price tag going up against Atlanta. They're just so bad defensively. Like I said, guys, worst defensive team in the league. Also a pace-up spot for the Knicks on the season. He's at 1.07 points per minute, lower usage rate, but he does a little bit of everything in the stat sheet. He'll get some steals, throw an occasional block, rebounds, assists. Not a high scorer or anything, but it's kind of like Lonzo, where he does a little bit of everything in the stat sheet. Not to Lonzo's degree, but pretty similar, though. He's only averaging 10 points per game, but 7.1 assists, 4.8 rebounds, 1.5 steals, which is very good. So, yeah, kind of like Lonzo, just not the upside that Lonzo has. Although, he does have upside, but Lonzo's got that near 60-point ceiling. Although Elfrid Payton's ceiling is going to kind of level out around 50. That's like the very, very, very high ceiling. Mike Conley, 5,500. I've been recommending him a lot lately. Now, I don't like this matchup versus OKC, but he's just been very solid. I mean, if you play Mike Conley, you're pretty much going to get around 30 fantasy points, maybe a little bit more, maybe just a touch less, but I mean, he's pretty safe, solid play every single night on the season. He's at 0.91 points per minute, but he's been playing around a point per minute lately, even a little bit better. 23% usage rate. I know the matchup sucks versus OKC. If you look at the DVP chart, OKC does rank, let's see, 1st versus shooting guards and 8th versus point guards. So it's a very bad matchup, and they also play slow, but I think he's fine if you're in a pinch. Josh Richardson, he comes in at 5,200, so I'm not sure if Joel Embiid's going to play or not. We know Ben Simmons is out. But the thing is that Ben Simmons is out, and it's really what affects Josh Richardson the most. So he's going to be returning from the concussion. He finally got cleared from concussion protocol, so he's going to get those mid-30s minutes again. And if Ben Simmons is out, not if Ben Simmons is out, Ben Simmons is out. If Joel Embiid's out, obviously it's going to just provide a boost to the entire floor like it has been for the past ever. So I would expect Richardson to get around close to 35 minutes. And if you look at his numbers on the season, he's at 0.85 points per minute, 21.3% usage rate. But if you take Simmons out the court, the number goes up a little bit around 0.9 points per minute, which is not amazing, but it's not bad either, especially for a 5,200 price tag. So Josh Richardson, I think he's a pretty safe, solid play. And it's also a pretty good matchup versus Detroit, who pretty much has no one left on this team. If you look at the DVP chart, Detroit does rank 15th versus shooting guard, so it is a pretty solid matchup for Josh Richardson. Middle of the road, but I think he'll be fine. Bogdanovich, he comes in at 5,100, so he recently had a 50-point fantasy outing recently. Now, this is a guy that can be very, very up or down. He's very scoring dependent for the most part. I mean, I think he threw in like 8 assists in the last game, or it was 8 rebounds or something like that. But he actually had some peripheral stats, which he doesn't typically do that much, but yeah, he had a monster game, and I like the spot here versus New Orleans. Now, I'm not expecting 50 fantasy points again, but he certainly has the upside for it. He's shown it multiple times this season. I realistically think he probably gets around 25 to 30 fantasy points, but the upside of having around 50 fantasy points at least is there for him. And you got to like the matchup here versus New Orleans. They just suck defensively. It's a pace-up spot, which I think suits a guy like Bogdan pretty well. On the season, 0.92 points per minute, 22.3% usage rate. New Orleans does rank 21st versus shooting guards, 22nd versus small forwards. So Bogdanovich, I think he's a pretty solid play in tournaments. Maybe a little bit less better of a play in cash games, but tournaments, certainly a good play. Harrison Barnes might be the better cash play. I mean, it's never exciting playing Harrison Barnes, but he's been pretty much a safe bet for around 30 fantasy points recently, which isn't too bad. Now, I like the spot versus New Orleans, pace up spot, just like I said about Bogdan. Now, he's been much worse point per minute wise, but he also plays more minutes than Bogdan. So I got him for around 35 minutes tonight, Bogdan around 30. On the season, he's averaging nearly 35 minutes per game, and Bogdan's only at 28. So it kind of levels out a little bit. So Barnes, not a guy I'm going out of my way to play, but if you have, 5K left in your lineup, I don't mind throwing in Harrison Barnes. I think you could do worse. Cam Reddish had a pretty good game last time out versus Charlotte, and he gets a pretty solid matchup here versus the Knicks. Now, they're pretty bad versus point guards. When it comes to shooting guards / small forwards, if I can find them, they rank 15th and 10th. So it's not like an amazing matchup, but it's still not that bad nonetheless. And on the season, his numbers aren't amazing, only averaging 0.77 points per minute with an 18.9% usage rate, but he has been playing a lot better than that recently. He's been flashing some upside. So Cam Reddish should get around 30 minutes, and I think he can probably get you anywhere from 25 to 30 fantasy points with upside of more. So Cam Reddish, I don't mind him at all. Mike Scott, so I don't know if Embiid's going to play or not. If Embiid's out, you can probably look for him to get around 30 minutes again, which is what he's been doing. He's been pretty much scoring anywhere from like 25 to 30 points, which is not that bad. And I like the spot here versus Detroit. They're just not that great defensively. They rank 20th versus power forwards and 24th versus center, so this is a pretty good matchup for Mike Scott if he's going to play or not. I mean, if Joel Embiid's in, don't play Mike Scott. If Joel Embiid's out, you can look Mike Scott's way. It's not like he's a slam dunk value play, but I mean, there's not too many value plays on the slate, so I don't think Mike Scott's the worst thing you can do. Now, just in general, he does suck point per minute wise at 0.7 points per minute, 13.8% usage rate. But if you take Joel Embiid off the court, those numbers go up, obviously. So Mike Scott, don't mind him. Jordan McRae, he comes in at 4,100. So if you guys didn't know, he's on Detroit now. And I don't know. I mean, I think he's going to be fine. The guy can score, and Detroit definitely needs guys that can score the ball. I mean, that can score points at this moment because we don't have all those guys I already talked about. No D Rose, Bruce Brown's questionable. If Bruce Brown's out, it's going to be a bump to Jordan McRae. There's just so many guys out for this team, so someone's got to score points. So it's honestly going to probably be Christian Wood, Don Maker, and Jordan McRae, as ugly as that sounds. Then you also got the guys like Langston Galloway and some of those guys. But sorry to pause really quick. But yeah, Bruce Brown's out. Jordan McRae should get around 25-ish minutes. If you look at his minutes, it's been around like 26, 24, around 21, something like that. So if Bruce Brown's out, obviously it's going to help him, and it's just going to be more reliance on Jordan McRae to score buckets, which we know he can. We saw it with the Wizards when that brief stint when Bradley Beal was out. It was pretty much the Jordan McRae show. He was scoring like 50 fantasy points. So I don't hate McRae. Not my most favorite play in the world, but 4,100 is not a bad price tag. And last but not least, we have Thon Maker. He comes in at 3,100. And the simple reason we like him is because John Henson is also out. So I forgot to mention that guy too. So we have no D Rose. We have no Andre Drummond, obviously, no Blake Griffin, no Luke Kennard, no Markieff Morris. Bruce Brown's questionable. I mean, no John Henson now, so there's just no bodies left on this team. So if Thon Maker is going to be forced into minutes, he should play over 20. If he can get over 20 minutes at 3,100, he should be able to pay off his price tag pretty easily. If you look at his numbers on the season, 0.84 points per minute. But if you take all of those guys off the court, he's almost a point per minute guy. Now, he only averages 12 minutes per game, but he should get over 20 here. And we saw brief stints recently where when he gets starts or he plays over 20 minutes, he pays off his price tag pretty easily. So Thon Maker, I think he's a pretty solid play. And again, if Joel Embiid's out, it's just going to soften their defense up, down, low. Even if Joel Embiid's in, 3,100, it's going to be hard for him not to pay off his price tag. So Thon Maker, I feel like he's a pretty slam dunk value play on tomorrow's slate as of right now. And that's pretty much going to be it for the guys we're going to go through. There's not a lot of players I have listed here. Usually I have a lot more, but there just wasn't that many guys that had my interest. I might be missing one, but if I am, you can let me know. You can always have differing opinions, but as of right now, this is, I think, some of the best plays on the slate, in my opinion. So, all right, before we get out of here, I do want to talk about the sponsor, OverlayDFS.com. All right, before we get out of here, I do want to talk about the sponsor, OverlayDFS.com. It's a nice breath of fresh air compared to DraftKings. I love DraftKings, but it can be a real grind. You're building lineups, you're building projections, you're trying to work with the salary cap restrictions, you're trying to find chalk plays, GPP plays. It can be tough. So if you want a more casual experience, you can head over to OverlayDFS.com, where it's basically a pick-em-based website. So for example, these are an example of tonight's lobby. So you pick from like 20 players and you pick your 12 favorite matchups. So this guy, he had DeMar DeRozan over Andrew Wiggins. He won that matchup. Sabonis over Jason Tatum. He won that matchup. Luka over Harden. He won that matchup, guys. It's as simple as that. And you pretty much just pick whoever you think is going to score the most fantasy points. And I will say this guy is 11-1, and the only thing he has to do to go 12-0 is have Hassan Whiteside outscore Damian Lillard, and they're by like 0.5 points. And if he goes 12-0 in his picks, he will be taking home the $17,000 jackpot tonight, which, congrats to him, but it's also going to suck a little bit because I would like that $17,000 jackpot. When that hits, it's going to go way down. So we'll see what happens. If he does win, big congrats to him because that's over $17,000 on a $22 entry. That's pretty darn good. But for just in general, if you finish in the top 10% of the contest, you can win 9x your money, which on DraftKings, the 9x your money, sometimes you got to win the whole thing, and even sometimes if you do win the whole thing, you're still not 9xing your money. So I love the payout structure here. You also have some other cool challenges. We have a Slump Buster challenge where if you lose 20 days in a row, not consecutive days, but say you play once a week for 20 weeks in a row and you lose every single time, they'll refund every single dollar that you deposited. And then also, if you go 0-12 in your picks one night, which is honestly sounds incredible, if you go 0-12 in your picks, they'll give you $500 for having the worst night of your life. So check it out, guys. OverlayDFS.com. Really do enjoy playing on the website. It's fun to sweat the games out on there. And there's no promo code required or anything. Just go over there, sign up, and have fun. All right, that's going to be it for this video, guys. Hope it was helpful. If it was, remember to leave a like. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. Really helps me out. Really appreciate it. Follow me over on Twitter. I'm at ChrisPennell16, and I'll see you guys in the next video.